Hi, I'm Arati. Recently, a friend and I went sketching at the Museum of the Home, and just down the street from that is Great Art, which is chock full of amazing art supplies. So, come shopping with me at Great Art, and at the end of the video, I'll show you the few things that I bought. Great Art's flagship store is on Kingsland Road in Shoreditch, about a half-an-hour walk from Liverpool Street Station, or maybe a 7 or 8 minute bus ride. They are one of the best stocked art shops in London, with a wide selection of paper, paint, drawing supplies, and also supplies for printmaking, ceramics, and sculpture. I'm starting the store on the left-hand side when you enter the shop. Lots and lots of shelves of pads of paper of every sort. Great Art does have a good selection of German and French brands in particular, along with all the regular art supplies you'd expect to find in any art shop in the UK. If you spot anything you like, you can also order online from their website, although I have found delivery to be variable in speed. There are more paper pads as you go through the shop. This is just one selection of them. And as you go through to different mediums, for example, watercolor and acrylic, they have more pads in those areas. If you're a fan of the Royal Talents Art Creation Sketchbook, they have a really good selection of these. Particularly, I was rather enamored of this shiny cover in kind of metallic silver. Although it's the one with cream paper, so I don't think that I would buy it. But they also have a good selection of the cork covers that have the white paper inside. My preference is definitely for the white paper. The next aisle is well stocked with all the calligraphy tools and materials that you could possibly need. Bamboo brushes and pens, sumi-e brushes in sets as well as individuals, as well as inks, nibs, anything literally that you might need. It's one of my aims to improve my calligraphy and handwriting, but I just don't have the time right now, so I did leave these on the shelves and did not pick up any. As I said before, in every different section where you have a different material, they do have pads and paper sketchbooks that are relevant to that section, and this is no exception. On the other side, even more pads and notebooks. I was intrigued by one in particular. There's a really chunky block of paper, and it did come in different sizes as well. There's also a good selection of instructional art books, and also these interesting storage boxes that flat pack that I hadn't seen before. At the end of this aisle, there was a good amount of clearance items. This included not just brushes, but paints, mediums, decoupage stuff, some craft bits and bobs, as well as a bunch of cards and gift wrap as well. There's also a nice seating area that they run workshops in. Right next to that is the aisle that holds all of the pastels and pencils. A very good selection of pan pastels and the accessories that go with them. Plenty of packs and sets as well if you're just getting started, followed by sennelier in open stock as well as sets. Then there were Block X pastels. I've never seen those before. And of course, the Unison pastels, loads and loads of those as well. And this is just the soft pastel section. We haven't even got to oil pastels yet. Just looking at beautiful displays like this Unison pastels one makes me want to buy them, even though I already know I don't have an affinity for soft pastels. But my willpower's pretty strong, so I did resist. Next to these, we move on to the oil pastels, sennelier, and another new to me brand, Jackson pastels. Have you ever tried these? Please let me know in the comments if you have. There's a really good selection of the Pentel brush pens as well as the Pentel sign pens in a bunch of different colors, as also Staedtler pens and pencils, and a rather large selection of these woodies. More temptation. I do have the white one, but resisted. These are followed by the entire Derwent range and, of course, Caran d'Ache. And on this side, there were some more pastels in different brands, the Jackson one as well as others. I was really pleased to see that the Derwent had plenty of open stock as well as the sets, and so did Caran d'Ache in most of their ranges. I don't think I can remember seeing the new Neo Arts there, but it might just be too new. They also had refills for their little gouache palette thing, and some Gouache Studio tubes, which I had not seen before. Plenty of the Neocolor 1s and 2s and the Pablo pencils and the Luminance and everything in all of the different open stock versions as well as the packs. And next to this was Faber-Castell, again, a very good selection of open stock pencils, which I always love to see to replace my stock. And of course the Faber-Castell drawing supplies, always really good. If you're looking for good graphite pencils, this is it. The other side of this aisle appropriately has erasers and sharpeners. In fact, I actually have this particular sharpener that I got from Great Art with 5 differently sized holes for different pencils. Again, any sort of eraser or sharpener that you could possibly need, including that one that I got from Peter's Art in Berlin. And of course, next to this, an entire shelf of mechanical pencils which do not need any sharpening, accompanied by the relevant leads. These are also one of my favorite art supplies. Back around to the aisle that has all the pastels. The next aisle has more drawing supplies. Some of these are student grade or crafty supplies, but there's also a really good selection of drawing materials, both Derwent as well as other brands for graphite. And then on the other side, they do have the special boxes, the wooden boxes of all the pencils that are more gifty than anything else, and a good selection of khadi papers. I was quite surprised to see so many empty spaces in their shelf, but they already have so much stock, I'm not sure what else they could put in there to fill it. Coming back out into the pastels and pencils aisle, as I like to call it, there is a display box full of cutting supplies, craft knives, cutting mats, that sort of thing, refill knives and things. And then at the top there were these jars, but I was too short to figure out what they were. Moving into the next aisle, I spied those Jackson pastels again, really curious about those. But this next aisle is full of fixative and those little models that you can get for figure drawing, as well as bags to hold all of your art supplies. Most of these were, I think, PV or plastic, and there were some cloth bags at the bottom as well. On the opposite side, more pads. Like I said, there's loads of paper in this shop, as well as these drawers, which I think like loads of brands do them for storing art supplies, and these cool boxes with like spaces for pastels and stuff. Once again, appropriately, there was pastel mat and pastel paper right next to the pastel storage boxes. Very appropriately merchandised, and I really, really appreciate that about Great Art. You don't have to keep going back and forth to different aisles to get different things. If you're buying pastels, pastel paper, storage, everything is right there. We're back around now to the end of the clearance section with some more glass and ceramic markers and things like that. And also at the top of this shelf were some Molitor extenders. I think these are for refilling, but I do have a refilling markers video coming up and I will talk more about that then. Further into the store, there are these packaging tubes, A3 and A2 pads, more pads, like I said, loads of pads, more cutting mats, cutting accessories, scissors, and so on. And then crossing over into where there's a nice rack of cards actually, followed by markers and fine liners in every single color you could possibly want. Again, pads right next to that for that particular purpose. And then the opposite side, there were these P.H. Martin watercolor inks, concentrated watercolor. And there were also a few other brands of inks and watercolors in this section, all of which I want to try someday. This was the aisle in which I faced the most temptation because I really wanted to take all of it home. There's also a really good stock of the Ecoline or Ecolina refills, as well as the brush pens and sets as well. And right next to that, my Achilles heel acrylic inks. I really love these, and I did take a couple home, which I will show you at the end of the video. As I said before, a really good selection of colors and inks, relevant paper on the opposite side, marker pads, marker paper, anything you might need. The next aisle is also markers, Tombow, Copics, all the usual suspects. And then coming out right next to the cashier desk at the end is a full section of Molotov markers as well as Poscas with all the colors you could possibly imagine. Very well stocked. On the other side of the cashier desk, they did have the Pantone markers. Again, I've not tried these, but I've heard they're fairly good. At this point, I decided to get myself a handy basket trolley and move over to the other side of the shop. We started off with a nice wall of brushes. Again, good selection. Options, sizes, whatever you might need for anything you might choose to do. Brushes on this side were, I think, more for resin work and stuff, because right opposite them was a section of resins and plasticky things that I have no idea how to use, but I'm sure many of you would. Again, something that I would like to experiment with someday, and now I know exactly where to come and get my art supplies. There were also on the other side the Schminke Aero Color, which is an acrylic ink that I really love. But for the first time in an actual shop, I saw airbrush machines, physical airbrush machines. Usually you have to buy them online. The next aisle was mediums and grounds that you can use for your painting. There's a good range of sizes to try as well as larger quantities. And on the opposite side, a bunch of palettes. palette paper, stay wet palettes, regular palettes, and all sorts. Loads and loads of things that you can use to mix your paint on. Beyond this section, there's a whole other section to explore, but we'll come to that in a minute. But first, we've still got the rest of this section to explore. On the end of the aisle are some palette knives and more brushes, followed by gilding supplies. A good variety and selection of both real and imitation leaf, as well as glues. And here we are back to that brush section that was at the beginning. Opposite this is the clay section, so there's polymer clay as well as regular clay, I guess. I'm not very familiar with this material, so have a look at what I'm showing you, and if it makes sense to you, great. At the end of this section, there are some carving tools and some actual soapstone that you can carve into sculptures. The more time I spend in this shop, the more hobbies I could pick up, honestly. It has what seems to be a really good range of supplies for this particular medium. I'd imagine it's at least enough to get you started, and then if you need anything else, I guess you could probably either go online or whatever. We're back now to the section of the store that's right next to the entrance where the baskets are and where I started. And this has a really good selection of liquid glazes for ceramics. It's really nice that they've put examples of what the glazes will look like so that when you're picking, I guess you can see what color you're going to end up with. Moving away from the entrance of the shop down into the next aisle. It is entirely for screen printing, so loads of inks, mediums, emulsions, and then on the other side they even have some screens that are ready to take home and use. And on the end here, let's just nip around. It's the overflow from the ceramics and modeling section. On this side, there are more screens and squeegees, and I think there were some tools for lino cut as well. And then some wooden battens and things at the end, so I guess you can make your own screens as well if you wanted in different sizes. Passing the relief printing tools and materials, there are more brushes down at the end, both watercolor brushes and brushes for oil, as well as down at the end some easels which you can spy over there. Coming back round to the relief printing section, there's a bunch of lino cut stuff, as well as I think there were some etching plates as well, if I'm not mistaken, and of course the ubiquitous jelly plate, which is everywhere these days. Remember seeing the scraper board as well. It was something I wanted to try, and some metal plates. Moving on now to mediums and varnishes, both for oil and watercolor and acrylic in this entire section. Once again, the Great Art staff have laid out appropriate paper opposite to this section. It's really handy not having to go all the way back to the other side of the shop. There are also some brush storage bits and bobs in this section, which we'll see what I picked up afterwards. Moving on to the final aisle in this section, it is full of oil paints. Loads and loads of brands and lots of colors and good amount of stock in each of them. I'm pretty sure you'd find exactly what you're looking for in here. And then more brushes on the left-hand side. I'm just giving you a glance down now to the end of the aisle over there with a few more relief supplies. I must say, with all the brushes scattered throughout the shop, I feel like they have the biggest selection of brushes that I've ever seen in any London art store. The next time I need to buy brushes, I'll probably just come in here instead of ordering them online. At the end of the section, they also have some of those buckets that you can wash your brushes in that have multiple sections, and a really good selection of bottles to hold all sorts of things in. There were also different kinds of storage pots and jugs and rollers and all sorts of crafty bits. Now we move on to the final section of the store, which is acrylics, gouache, watercolors, and framing supplies. The section starts with a bunch of pure pigments that you can mix with different binders to make whatever paint you like, followed by row after row after row of paints of all sorts. This is the other side of that display case against which the easels were leaning, and here we are back to the other side of the pigment shelf as well. Next to this are some rather convenient boxes for recycling various things. I think the last time I was here, there was a staircase here instead of a wall, and there was a downstairs section, but I guess they changed things around. It's no surprise that the watercolor section has the appropriate watercolor paper. Again, there's no chasing around the shop, forgetting things and looking for stuff that you need. I've made a note of this Clairefontaine paper because I do want to try it at some point. Again, in this section, there were loads of supplies that I had not seen before and that I do want to try at some point. Looking at all these tubes beautifully laid out and displayed just makes me want to make things, you know? It's just so inspiring. On the other side, there were these round papers. Again, something I want to try, perhaps not right now because I just don't have the time. And there were also really lovely sets of watercolors of all sorts and, of course, appropriate pads. Around the end, there were some palettes, more watercolors, some of which I had not seen before. Again, a few empty shelves, not quite sure why. And then we moved on to another section with more mediums and varnishes, and some empty paint palettes and water brushes so that you can make your own watercolor palettes with whatever colors you want. These are really nice. I have now, I think, 3 of them. A really good comprehensive section, and my friend with me who is a watercolorist as well as working with oils, I think she had a great time in this section. I must commend them for their variety and range of paper, literally. We're back down towards the end where there are the acrylic gouache and acrylic paints. And on this side, there's more paper, which is watercolor paper, but I tend to use that for acrylics as well. And then there's Mission Gold watercolors, which I haven't really seen anywhere else in store, as well as Kuretake Gansai refills. So if you have the big sets, you can replace particular colors that you might want. They had a fairly limited selection of the colors for this, but I imagine they'd have more online for sure. Again, more paper down this end. The paper is pretty never-ending. And there's arches or arche, however you want to pronounce it, down the end of that aisle. Moving on to acrylic, mediums, gels, paste surfaces, and then on the opposite side, more acrylic paint in various different brands. There are even these pouch ones, which I hadn't seen before, and at the end there are the tubes of golden. They also had the So Flat in open stock, which I had not seen previously. I usually have to get them online, and plenty of fluid acrylics as well. There was also this decent section of pouring acrylics and a marbling section at the bottom. The next aisle was pure acrylic heaven with giant bottles of paint. This is just so aesthetically pleasing as well. All of the colors are so nice, just so nice. I tend to use mostly golden acrylics unless it's an acrylic ink, but I feel like I should come back and try some of these. I just need to check the light fastness. There was also a really good selection of La Frankenbourgeois paints. These are the vinyl paints that I've seen loads of people use. And then the System 3 acrylics, that was a really good range. I did start off using these before I switched to golden, and lots of Amsterdam paints as well. This is a brand that I will explore because I really do like the acrylic ink that they have. Really, the range of acrylics that Great Art has is pretty epic. I don't think I've seen this many aisles anywhere else. So if you want acrylics, this is the place to be. They also do have this small section of craft paints and some tissue papers and bits and bobs that you could get for kids, and paper in stacks. The far end of this section has portfolios and storage boxes, basically things to carry your art in. And opposite this are some large rolls of paper that you could use for various purposes. And then this last section, which we'll go to in a minute. At the end of this aisle, there are some decoupage bits. And beyond those shelves of paper are framing supplies, panels, canvases, and more. Again, a good variety of stuff that any artist might need to work with. On the opposite side, there are more shelves of different papers. These are loose leaf papers, and you could probably use them for anything. Everything is clearly labeled, so you know exactly what's what. Some things are not within my reach, but I'm only 5 feet tall, so I need a stool to get to half of this stuff. But I imagine that somebody in the shop, like the staff, would really be willing to help you. This next section is all about packaging your art. A lot of this stuff I've only ever seen online. The frames, obviously, you can get anywhere, but those foam corners and things for making sure that your artwork stays secure, I've not really seen in a shop before. So it's really nice to be able to see it, handle it, look at the actual size, and then buy it. There are also these bags to transport canvases and artwork. Really useful to have them visible that you can actually see, touch, and feel and look at. The final section has some glass and mixed media markers, wooden panels for painting, some framing supplies, as well as some foam board and mount board and some washi tape. This was the last section of the shop. So what did I buy? First of all, I picked up this Dylon navy blue dye just because I have a jacket that needs refreshing and I haven't tried this before, but maybe I'll film it, we'll see. Next, I got the cork version of the Art Creation Sketchbook. I do have the Art Deco version with the white paper, and I do like this. So I thought I'd pick up the cork version just because it has a plainer cover. Now let me quickly open this and show you the insides. There you go. So it has this really nice cork cover which has space to actually, like, the thing I don't like about this Art Deco one is that I can't really write on top of it, whereas this has enough space to put my name or whatever I want to do on it. And inside, it has the nice white paper that I prefer to the traditional cream paper that most people seem to like in the Royal Talents. That will go on my shelf of empty sketchbooks to be used at a future date. The other thing that I got was this cute little Gerstacker pencil stand. I think it's meant to be for brushes, but I intend to use it for pencils. And let's just test a few. Most of them seem to go in just fine, doesn't matter the thickness. These are all normal size pencils. That one's a hexagonal one, and then this one is the luminance, which I like to keep face down. Then the Prismacolor also does fit in, and I tried a Tombow, but it doesn't really fit. And then the Faber-Castell Polychromos fits just fine, both directions as well. Obviously, I would use this for my favorite pencils. Oh, the Pentel doesn't fit either. Let's pop some brushes in. I guess this is its proper use, but I'm not really going to use it for brushes. They're too tall anyway. I just feel like they would fall over. But yeah, it looks really cute, and I'm looking forward to using this for my favorite pencils. The next thing I picked up was this glass bottle with a dropper in it. I'm going to use this to mix up some acrylic ink in white because I run through that really quickly, and the dropper is a good shape as well, so hopefully that'll work out well for me. Sticking with the acrylic ink theme, I picked up two new colors, Daler-Rowney's Red Earth and Amsterdam's Naples Yellow Deep, which is quite opaque. The Red Earth is a really nice, deep, rich brown, and I'm testing it here on the white Royal Talents paper. Very smooth to spread. I love the Daler-Rowney inks in any case. Amsterdam is a new brand to me, and this Naples yellow looked so opaque that I really had to get it. It's such a beautiful yellow, and I am going to mix it with the red oxide as well to see how it does. It's super, super opaque, and how nicely it mixes with the red oxide to create that kind of yellowy brown color. I can see myself using this quite a lot in my artwork. Yellow is my favorite color, and since this is mixing up to quite an almost ochre color, I might replace the ochre. Very pleased with those. Finally, I picked up this empty metal palette, which can be used for watercolors, gouache, anything you like really. And it did not come with these pans. I've put them in after the fact. It just came empty with the holder in it. It holds 14 full pans or double that number of half pans if you like. However, one of the things with this palette is that in this middle space, these pans do not fit. So instead of having a row of 3, I just have 2. But what I can do is take out the entire holder and add little magnets and just put in these pans like so that then I can probably get 22 pans in the entire thing. And that gives me quite a lot of paint because I do prefer the large full pans to half pans. I can also hack this by removing this extra palette if I want to. Anyway, that's all I bought at Great Art. I hope you enjoyed it and watch this video next for more inspiration. Bye!